Well, next this evening, an extended edition of Calendar, which means that a vet's life will now be shown at a later date.
Wednesday the 8th of March, and an evening's bingo's in progress at Walker's Bingo Hall in Mexborough. Just before the break, the cashiers started to prepare the prize money, over £1,000 that night. She looked up to see a masked man pointing a gun at her. He approached and held the gun to her head as he stuffed £1,200 into his pockets. He seemed noticeably left-handed and spoke with a rough Yorkshire accent. After threatening her and warning her not to call the police, he ran out. The cashier saw him climb into the open hatchback of a dark-coloured car. It could have been a Ford Fiesta. Two other men were already inside. They drove off towards the Mexborough bypass. Call Crime Stoppers now on 0800 555 222 if you have information about this or any other crime. You don't have to give your name, your call is free, and you could claim a Community Action Trust reward.
Survivors of Hillsborough tell their tale to the Prince and Princess of Wales. Liverpool players return to Sheffield to meet injured fans. And the police spokesman who criticised fans who surged through the gates. Good evening. Lord Justice Taylor will visit Sheffield tomorrow to begin his inquiry into the Hillsborough disaster which killed 94 people. Home Secretary Douglas Hurd, who announced the inquiry, said the future of football lay in an ID card system and all-seater grounds. Tonight, in a special hour-long calendar, we'll have reaction to that announcement from Westminster. We'll have all the latest news from Hillsborough, the royal visit, the Liverpool players who returned to Sheffield, and the appeal for the families of the victims.
And later in the programme, we'll be examining the questions posed by the police operation. A Liverpool lawyer says a policeman has given him a statement describing it as pathetic. But a South Yorkshire Police spokesman says we're proud of the jobs we did. We'll also be examining the medical response and the future of football stadiums. Is it time to move them out of town and to make them all-seaters? But it's to the events at Hillsborough and Sheffield today that we turn first.
The Prince and Princess of Wales arrived in Sheffield late this afternoon to visit survivors of the Hillsborough disaster. The royal couple went straight to the Royal Hallamshire Hospital, where doctors are treating 20 of the victims. 6 of those are in intensive care. Nick Powell reports.
Become almost a regular feature of the aftermath of the disasters, which have themselves become all too regular a feature of British life. Inside, spontaneous, apparently unplanned applause. Medical staff and administrators pleased to see the royal couple. The royal lift to morale in these cases already well documented. The princess met a Liverpool fan well enough to sit up in bed. Many of his friends, of course, were not. A club pennant hung proudly above his bed. The princess, as always, listened intently, quietly asking about the horrific details. The fan tried to explain exactly what had gone on. The prince, too, listening carefully, asking questions, and finding time, too, for a happier moment.
Well, the Prince and Princess of Wales at the Royal Hallamshire Hospital a short time ago. The royal couple have now travelled across the city to the Northern General Hospital, where another 21 of the survivors of Saturday's disaster are being treated, 9 of them in the intensive care unit. We hope to bring you a report on that a little later in the programme. The Prince and Princess weren't the only visitors to Sheffield today. The Liverpool football team travelled across the Pennines to talk to survivors and to return to Hillsborough Stadium. Maria Malone reports.
The Liverpool players arrived by coach this lunchtime at Sheffield's Northern General Hospital, where 21 fans are still receiving treatment for their injuries. 9 of those are in intensive care. The players stayed silent as they filed off the coach, accompanied by manager Kenny Dalglish. He'd earlier told how he'd wept watching fans arrive at Liverpool's Anfield ground to pay tribute to the dead. The sense of shock shared by the team at Saturday's tragedy was summed up by John Barnes.
Well, I think everyone was just stunned. We had no idea what had happened. You know, we were ready to go back onto the pitch, and we didn't know the seriousness of the situation. Now we found out, I think it has killed the season. You know, football is now secondary to what can be done for the families of the dead and for the people here in the hospital. So, you know, as I said, really we have no idea what's going to happen as far as football goes, but that doesn't matter anyway.
Will it help coming to see those injured today?
We hope so. We hope so.
And what would your message be to Liverpool fans, John?
Well, it's difficult really because, you know, I think a lot of the fans would really still be thinking of in terms of the league and are we going to take part in the cup. But I think if not just Liverpool fans, if people could just rally around and help those in Liverpool, I think that's the only message we can give.
And a message for the families of the bereaved?
Well, it's early days yet, but I'm sure that things will be organised and we're going to go around and meet all the families and see what can be done. But, you know, that is the main priority, the families of the bereaved and the injured. So that's all we can do, try and help them.
Do you think the FA Cup should carry on? Do you think there should be a final?
I haven't even thought about it, but I can't contemplate one with Liverpool being in it.
And you don't think you could play Nottingham Forest again in the semi-final?
No, I don't think so. Okay, thank you.
This was a private visit in which the players spent 90 minutes speaking to their injured supporters. They left the hospital by a side exit.
Well, the police today issued a complete list of those who died in the tragedy. The vast majority of them came from Merseyside, but some were from Sheffield. Chris Kiddie reports.
Joe McCarthy, originally from Ealing in West London, was in his third and final year of a business studies course. He shared a house in Elland Road in Sheffield with 5 student friends.
Very nice bloke, good friend. We had good times, you know. He enjoyed himself. He worked hard too, though. Pleasure to know.
And what's the feeling in the house now?
Disbelief.
Joe's girlfriend Penny, also a student, is said to be devastated by his death. Another victim was fireman Francis McAllister. He'd been staying with his girlfriend's parents at Syke Edge in Sheffield at the weekend. She says he died trying to save a friend.
He went in with friends and the tickets weren't checked and the gates were already open. So they went in and then the police apparently tried to move people over to one side and so the crush got worse. And Robbie said to Francis, right, we're going to go over there. But there was another boy with them called Nicky, and he was really small, and Francis couldn't see him. So Francis said, I'm going to go and find him. And Nicky died, and Francis was found on top of him. We've been seeing each other about 4 years and living with each other about 3. He was just brilliant. The thing is, it makes me really happy now that he's got so many friends who love him because he was just such a brilliant person. That is Francis helping someone. We knew that because he's so big and so strong that he would be doing something like that because that's Francis.
Chris Kiddie reporting. And we've just heard that the University of Sheffield has said that another 2 of its students died at Hillsborough. They were Tracy Cox from Wiltshire and Richard Jones from Liverpool. Another student, Colin Orton from Liverpool, is in intensive care. Well, at Sheffield Town Hall, officials are in the early stages of organising the national appeal for the injured and bereaved. The government's already pledged £500,000 and the Town Hall staff have the task of collecting money from the public, as Peter McNerney reports.
The flag remains at half-mast outside Sheffield Town Hall today. Inside, Town Hall workers are busy coordinating the national disaster appeal launched yesterday by the Lord Mayors of Sheffield, Liverpool and Nottingham. Collecting boxes last used for comic relief have been brought out of storage. On the phone, there have already been offers of help ranging from charity football games to pop concerts. There's been a steady stream of people making donations, but within days, the small amount collected from the public so far should swell to hundreds of thousands, with contributions made nationally through the banks.
We have an arrangement with the Co-op Bank here in Sheffield and they're dealing with the other clearing banks so that people will be able to make donations over the counter. Here in Sheffield they'll be able to come into the town hall to make donations either in the publicity department or in the main rates hall where we hope to establish collecting points.
Meanwhile, cheques can be sent to the Hillsborough Disaster Appeal, care of Sheffield Town Hall. And in the foyer, a book of remembrance has been laid out, already signed by civic leaders as a lasting tribute to those who died in Britain's worst sporting tragedy.
Well, next, the day's reaction to the Hillsborough tragedy at Westminster, also the much criticised police operation, the medical response and the future of football grounds. But that's after our first break.
You ain't seen nothing yet. Baby, you just ain't seen nothing yet. Here's something you never forget, baby. You just ain't seen nothing yet. Baby, you just ain't seen nothing yet.
Oh!
Here's something
no, Boyle, no, get up, Boyle.
You just ain't seen nothing yet.
The Daily Mirror, Britain's favourite colour paper.
In the immediate aftermath of the Hillsborough disaster, much attention, indeed criticism, has been focused on the role of South Yorkshire Police. In particular, why was there such a large build-up of fans outside the ground at the last minute? What were the events that led to those fans being allowed into an already packed section of the terraces? And once the emergency arose, did the police force react quickly enough? Well, John Shires has been looking at the sequence of events that led up to Britain's worst ever sporting disaster.
The gate was opened at police direction. I am not aware of any connection between the opening of the gate and the surge on the terrace.
Despite Peter Wright's statement on Saturday night, many had already decided where the blame lay, with South Yorkshire Police. And although much of the inquiry is likely to centre on why the gates were opened, other questions also need to be answered. Question 1. Why did Liverpool fans arrive at Hillsborough late, causing the crush outside the ground? Coach operators and British Rail say they got the vast majority of Liverpool supporters to the vicinity of the stadium by 2 o'clock, an hour before kick-off. Yet eyewitnesses claimed that at 2:30, although the Forest End was packed, there were large spaces in the Leppings Lane End reserved for Liverpool fans, with little prospect of filling the ground before kick-off time. Some alleged that around 430 supporters arriving at 5 to 2 on a special train at Wadsley Bridge Station, about 3/4 a mile from the ground, were not allowed by police to move off until around 2:30, increasing the chances of a last-minute surge on the turnstiles. Question 2. What happened to policing at the turnstiles? Normally at major games, policing is directed at organising spectators outside the ground into orderly lines approaching the turnstiles. The police say they had 15 mounted men and 40 other officers on duty in the area, yet the situation developed into a free-for-all. So question 3, why was kick-off not delayed? At the FA Cup semi-final 2 years ago between Leeds and Coventry, the kick-off was put back because supporters had been delayed. On Saturday, the crush started because supporters were desperately trying to get in for the start. Tonight, there's confusion over whether or not the police asked for a delay. Question 4, and vitally, why was the gate opened? At 2:50, a police officer outside the turnstiles gave the order for this gate to be opened. The crowd surged forwards to the nearest entrance, the tunnel leading to the already packed central enclosure, ignoring the 2 other accesses to the less crowded pens on either side. A friend of the steward on duty has spoken about what happened.
I saw him on Saturday and they were, late up set. And he says, "Coach," he says, "it's my gate," he says. I said, "I'm right upset," he says, but he said a policeman came up to him and asked him to open the gate, and he turned around and said, "No way am I opening them." So they come back with some more, and he said, "Our inspector says you've got to open them gates," and he took the keys out of his hand, and Mr. Cream, we asked him, "Don't open them doors, because if you open them, you're going to have death on your hand, you know what's going to happen." And we just opened the door and that was it.
And a steward on duty for a previous semi-final says police should have learned from experience then when they quickly opened gates at the front of the same enclosure to relieve pressure.
I remember on the day of that occurrence, a police officer, I don't know who he was or what his rank was, but I heard him say in my presence to a colleague, if we hadn't have done that today, i.e. opened the gates, there would have been deaths. And I thought, well, my God, in 1981, there was a lesson to be learned. It's all very well being wise after the event, but 81 was the event. I mean, do people have to die before we take action?
And finally, question 5, why did police inside not react quicker? BBC Match of the Day pictures show that when the tragedy was happening, only a few officers were actually helping the rescue efforts. Some have claimed at first police actually pushed back desperate fans trying to escape the crush. And half an hour after the game had been stopped, police were still lined up across the field, leaving fans to carry makeshift stretchers and tend to the injured and dying.
Well, because the whole question of Saturday's police operation is now to be the subject of an independent inquiry, South Yorkshire Police are not prepared to make any further official comment. But this afternoon, the county's Chief Constable, Peter Wright, visited some of his officers who had assisted at the ground. Mr. Wright said he had decided to visit his officers to show his confidence in their actions before, during and after Saturday's tragedy. And he told them he was confident that when the full facts emerge, South Yorkshire Police would be fully vindicated. Well, meanwhile, an official of South Yorkshire Police Federation said his members should be proud of their actions on Saturday.
800 police were on duty in and around Hillsborough. When disaster struck, they were among the first to tend the injured. Most are members of the Policemen's Union, the Police Federation. Their spokesman feels they've been unfairly singled out for criticism.
I am sick of seeing on television and reading in the press these instant experts, doctors and a few lawyers who all seem to know more about our job than we do, telling us what we should have done. That if there had been police officers just inside those gates that day, funneling people into the outer areas, then this wouldn't have happened. And I'm saying to you that if police officers had have been in there, when this mob surged through, the police officers would have been trampled to death underneath it. You just can't handle them. And the vast majority of that lot had been drinking, the ones that were arriving late, and they will not be told where to go. They won't do anything you try to do. And what can you do?
So are you saying the fans are to blame then?
The police certainly aren't to blame. Because if the fans would do what the police are asking them to do, there wouldn't be any problem, because people would be orderly. And if people were orderly, they wouldn't have these problems. You can't crush all those people if people were orderly. It's just not possible unless you know a way that I don't.
It'll be up to the public and external police inquiry to establish exactly what went wrong. The Federation's view is simple.
If they can't have these matches without all this upset, both to the people who are attending it and those who've got the job of trying to sort it all out, then it shouldn't take place. Let them watch it on television or something like that. My people should not be asked to go into situations like that, where it's always a no-win situation for us. They shouldn't have to do it. That's not necessary.
Well, for any officer at Hillsborough on Saturday, the mental scars will remain for many months, for years, and perhaps even longer. That, at any rate, was the experience of police who were on duty at Bradford City when the horrific fire occurred there in May 1985. Superintendent Charlie Mawson of West Yorkshire Police was one of the senior officers at the ground that day. Superintendent Mawson, in the face of all the grief, it's easy to forget the trauma suffered by individual police officers. What are the main problems they have, long and short term?
The short-term problem, of course, is being confronted by the horrific scenes. You're seeing your fellow men die in not very pleasant fashion. That has to be coped with. The mental attitude. The bodies have to be recovered, and it usually falls the lot of the police officers to recover those bodies.
But I gather, in fact, that at incidents like this, individual police officers end up feeling guilt themselves. Now, why should that be?
There are those officers who do feel guilt, it's quite normal actually. If I can quote you an instance from the Bradford fire, 4 days after the fire, when I was at the ground, we were working amongst the ashes of the stand, one of my officers, who was a paratrooper and a guardsman, suddenly sat down and started to cry. And I realised then that they were announcing over the loudspeaker system the list of the deceased from the Bradford fire. And he said, "You're burnt, and all my mates seem to have got burnt, and I'm not."
But what counselling is available for them when individual police officers who do suffer this sort of trauma?
In the West Yorkshire Force, we were fortunate that the Police Federation, along with the ACPO members, the Association of Chief Police Officers, rapidly realised that some counselling was required. And within days, arrangements had been made for any officer that needed counselling to obtain psychiatric counselling. We now have within the force a confidential counselling service, which any officer can refer to by his own volition, or which all officers from the rank of inspector upwards are trained to look for stress symptoms in officers.
But this is obviously going to be the case here, would you say?
I'm quite sure that there will be cases of stress.
And they're going to have to be referred pretty quickly if their careers are to be secured.
Yes.
And their marriages and their families.
Yes, and some of the officers themselves.
Mr. Mawson, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, there have been many questions asked about medical provision at the ground on Saturday and much criticism of the ensuing chaos. The main questions which are raised are, was there sufficient medical provision? Was the equipment available of the right standard? And what was the response of the emergency services on the day? There were just 30 St John's Ambulance volunteers, some were as young as 12, at the ground then to deal with the disaster at the start. Ambulance and fire crews were quick to mobilise, but could such a huge disaster ever have been catered for?
In the carnage that was Hillsborough, first aiders more used to cuts and grazes was suddenly the only hope for the dying. 30 St John's Ambulance Brigade volunteers were on duty at the match, twice the usual number, but they had little equipment. Hoardings had to be used as stretchers. Doctors told of an oxygen bottle empty, no resuscitation equipment available. Medical provisions at the ground will now be a key question addressed by the public inquiry.
There has been criticism, but a lot of the criticism without knowing the full facts. Let's listen to the inquiry and then find out on all the facts, including that.
The questions are likely to be, were there sufficient facilities or trained staff available, and was there enough life-saving equipment? A point answered today by first aid chiefs.
The oxygen was in the ambulance that was by the stand that was in trouble. The cylinders were in fact full. There has been some criticism that they weren't full, but they were full. They were in all the 3 ambulances that were there had oxygen. Defibrillators wouldn't normally be carried in St John ambulances because it's not first aid. We're not trained in their use.
Legally, ultimate responsibility for medical cover at the ground lies with Sheffield Wednesday, who are refusing to comment until the inquiry opens. What there's little dispute about is the rapid response of the professional emergency services. 25 ambulances were on the scene within minutes. And at Sheffield's 2 hospitals, the Royal Hallamshire and the Northern General, hundreds of off-duty staff answered calls for help. There'd been exercises before, but as one administrator said, how do you prepare for a national disaster on your doorstep?
Well, by coincidence, leaders of West Yorkshire's emergency services held a conference today to discuss how they should respond to a disaster. The meeting at the fire service headquarters at Birkenshaw near Bradford was planned 5 months ago. But the events of this weekend put their subject matter into sharp focus. Barbara Govan reports.
Today's disaster seminar brought together not just emergency services, but all those with a role to play when disaster strikes. Social workers, emergency planners, power suppliers, counsellors, the Salvation Army. While they talked about what to do after catastrophe, their thoughts were undoubtedly with their counterparts in neighbouring South Yorkshire, whose skills have been put to the test by Hillsborough. The absence of medical equipment at the soccer ground has been criticised, but even the ambulance service in West Yorkshire has had to launch a charity appeal to buy the kind of equipment that could have saved lives on Saturday. Defibrillators can jump-start a heart with an electric shock, but they can only be used by well-trained operators.
That's fine, having medical equipment on hand, so long as you've got the people there that know how to use that equipment and are competent to use it. You would need paramedics, or you'd need medical staff there to be able to use those.
Another speaker was just back from Sheffield. West Yorkshire Police had lent their crisis computer, developed after the Bradford fire, to speed identification of victims.
It's a very emotive and stressful situation for people who are worried that perhaps their relatives are involved in that disaster. If we can reassure them as quickly as practicable by using computers that they are safe and well, hopefully, which is in the majority of cases, then of course it's achieved its aim.
Delegates updated their speeches with Hillsborough, now at the top of the national catalogue of disasters. They agreed you can't predict how or where it will happen, but with Hillsborough on everyone's minds, there was a sense of urgency to make sure West Yorkshire will be ready if disaster strikes here.
Well, with me now, Jim Wardrope, who was the consultant in charge of accident and emergency department at the Northern General Hospital in Sheffield, where many of the Hillsborough victims were treated, and John Berry, Assistant Director of the Red Cross in South Yorkshire. John Berry, let's just go back to 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. I take it that your members were not actually at the time on duty in Hillsborough?
That's right. Our members were about their normal daytime activities at home.
And they're not normally required at such occasions?
That's right. In South Yorkshire, the St John's Ambulance Brigade actually provide the cover on this site.
So your members were what? They reacted to the call and then they arrived?
That's correct. There was a radio broadcast asking for first aid and medical personnel to attend the scene. Because of that, I got a call out and we responded straight away.
When they got there, did they find really there was much they could do?
Certainly the individual first aiders who responded and went direct to the scene played a role on terms of basic first aid and were very actively involved. By the time we managed to mobilise our ambulance team, most of the casualties have been evacuated.
Couldn't we at this point perhaps say, isn't it a marvellous job was done by the St John's Ambulance Brigade?
Certainly, I've no question about that. I saw the team when they came away from the ground and they'd obviously been working very, very hard under extremely difficult conditions.
What would they normally expect to have done? The odd fainting fit or perhaps sadly a heart attack, but just individual cases of people feeling unwell?
That would be the norm for that kind of event. When I'm planning for a major first aid event on a duty like that, I do consider that 0.5% of the crowd attendance may give us a problem. The vast majority of that 0.5% will be very, very minor.
So with 53,000 people on the ground, it happens every year, big semi-final Hillsborough, you didn't think there was anything out of the normal, you think possibly a sufficient cover?
I would assume that whoever was planning the job would have sorted it, yeah.
Well, Jim Wardrope, the hospital operation has been much praised. Did, from your point of view, everything go as you had planned in such an emergency?
Yes, I mean, one can only plan so far, but the plan went exceedingly well, and I'm proud to be part of that team.
It has been said there weren't enough respirators. Is that the case?
Well, initially there weren't. It's very seldom you have to ventilate in very sudden space of time, 18 patients as we had to do. The ventilators were quickly found from theatres and other areas of the hospital. But in the meantime, the job can be done just using a hand machine.
And what about the flow of ambulances? Were you happy with the way that the casualties actually got to the hospital in time?
They arrived exceedingly quickly. Within an hour of the incident beginning, we had most of the patients in the hospital. And these weren't minor injuries, they were dead and dying patients.
You're in charge of accident and emergency. You've had a plan, have you not? An emergency plan. You've had rehearsals.
Yes.
For an accident which was not a football accident. What was it?
No, the scenario we used was a bus accident on Tinsley Viaduct on the M1.
Right, but knowing that there are 55,000 people going to be in town, a big crowd, excited crowd, I know it happens every year, but do you not perhaps stand by, even in the back of your mind, thinking something might happen?
In the back of my mind, it is there, but every Saturday we have this problem, and one can't sort of be in the hospital every Saturday.
And what is your opinion? I know you're at the hospital, you're not at the ground, but what is your opinion about the standard of medical care available at the ground, and particularly the equipment?
I think they did very well indeed with the equipment that was available. There has been some question about defibrillators. In situations such as these, the basic principles of first aid are that airway comes first, and all of these patients required airway care rather than defibrillators.
And what would you say about the role of the St John's Ambulance Brigade?
I think they did a marvellous job in the circumstances.
And echoed by you and indeed the rest of your members who rushed to the call.
Both organisations worked side by side at the scene, certainly, and I've no arguments with anything that was happening down there.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, after the next break, we'll be looking at the future of football grounds, their fences, their sighting and their safety. And we'll also be talking to the man who's the Director of Design for the stadium for the World Student Games in Sheffield.
Moving on to finance, it's been all action in the banking world. NatWest, one of Britain's largest banks, today announced some very positive changes to their current account. Transaction charges have been completely dropped.
Cheers.
NatWest have also introduced a new account, Current Plus, an account that gives you interest on your money. A welcome addition.
Well, old boy, could be time to go home.
So, it's good news for 89 from the Action Bank.
There's a great new cereal from Kellogg's that's just for kids. Big kids. New Kellogg's Toppers. Grown-up shredded whole wheat with a yummy, scrummy sweet topping on the top. New Kellogg's Toppers for the big kid in you.
You ain't seen nothing yet. Baby, you just ain't seen nothing yet. Here's something you never forget, baby. You know, you just ain't seen nothing yet. Baby, you just ain't seen nothing yet.
Oh!
Here's
Hey,
something,
no, boy, no, get up, boy.
You know, you just ain't seen nothing yet.
The Daily Mirror, Britain's favourite colour paper.
We regret to inform all passengers waiting to depart of further delays.
There is a great holiday alternative at Yorkshire Caravans with a new ABI touring caravan. Have as many holidays as you like this and every year from as little as £3,660. Check out your great holiday alternative at Yorkshire Caravans of Bawtry, 1 mile north of Bawtry on the A638.
Now there's a brand new Fiesta, Ford have reduced the maximum retail price on all previous Fiesta cars and vans, so you could save £440 on an XR2. And interest rates could be as low as 2.9%, 5.6% APR with Ford Credit's latest finance plans. See your Ford dealer before he's sold out.
You're back with this specially extended edition of Calendar. Now, one of the big questions facing football is the safety of the game's grounds. Ironically, the match programme on Saturday sang the praises of Hillsborough as a scene for the FA Cup semi-final. Sheffield Wednesday chairman Bert McGee wrote in his welcome to Liverpool and Notts Forest fans that Hillsborough was regarded as the perfect venue for such matches. But instead, Saturday's tragic events raised again a host of questions about safety at soccer matches. Should stadia be all-seat affairs? Should grounds be out of town with plenty of space around them? Should safety guidelines be much, much tougher? And should the anti-hooligan fences be ripped down? Many incidents at football matches have raised the issues time and time again. Well, the fencing in of the fans will be one of the main issues to be discussed in the near future. And today, a Norfolk businessman claimed that a collapsible fence he invented 4 years ago was completely ignored by football clubs. John Frowlow from King's Lynn says he lost £500,000 because nobody was interested. He reckoned his fence would have saved many lives on Saturday because it would have relieved the crush.
This is the fence that could have saved 94 lives on Saturday. When it's put up and secured, it can withhold the strongest pressure from crowds. It was tested at King's Lynn Football Ground 4 years ago by its inventor, John Frowlow. It was made in direct response to the Bradford City fire, where many people escaped the flames by freely running onto the pitch. This fence can be pushed down at the touch of a button. It works by compressed air being pushed through pipes, which then operates a piston to release the mechanism. entire sections can be pushed down if necessary. It's reckoned that the fence could have been installed at Hillsborough's Leppings Lane end for about £70,000. Mr Fraulo held demonstrations around the country at the time. Football clubs were invited, but not one turned up. The directors, including Mr Fraulo's nephew Robert, now owe £500,000. If more notice had been taken of the invention, tragedies like Hillsborough could have been avoided.
Well, the nearest football ground in the country is at Scunthorpe United. There they've opted for limited fencing and the stadium is out of town. Ian Cundall has been to Scunthorpe today and he found that much has been learnt from previous mistakes.
Glanford Park is the most modern football ground in Britain. Its designers learned from Ibrox and from Bradford. Wide escape doors open straight from the terraces onto 8 acres of open ground outside. Visiting fans are constantly monitored by police video cameras, even on the approaches to the ground. Officers are ordered to prevent the build-up of crowds. The layout of the ground was designed by club chairman Graham Pearson.
It could not happen here. We're very pleased with the design of it. We've incorporated the latest thinking and we feel that it is possibly the safest ground in the country. We look very closely at the turnstiles, the exits. We bring people in at low level and then they rise upwards to view the game at a higher level. So you're not crushing from the back and pushing forward. You actually come in at the front and disperse backwards and sidewards.
Safety doesn't come cheap. Glanford Park cost £3 million, a move only made possible by the lucrative sale of Scunthorpe's old town centre ground to a supermarket chain. Police were closely involved in the design. The stadium can take 12,000 fans, half of them seated. Only the visitors' terraces behind the goal are fenced in, and that was on the insistence of the local council.
The home supporters, we didn't erect fencing. We was recommended to do so by our local authorities, but we felt that there wasn't the need. But we've got the exits where the turnstiles come through straight into the ground. People then can spread the width of the stadium and people will just disperse themselves along.
Glanford Park has had some influential visitors for a 4th Division club. Mrs Thatcher is among those who have hailed its design and its departure for a greenfield site. But if other clubs are to follow, football must be willing to give up its city centre roots and move out of town.
That was Ian Cundall reporting on the new Scunthorpe United ground, thought to be one of the safest in the country. Well, the Hillsborough Disaster has then set more posers for the people who design sports grounds. In Sheffield itself, work is already underway on a new athletics stadium to come into operation when the city hosts the World Student Games in 1992. The Don Valley Stadium will house 40,000 people during the opening ceremony for the Games. Now, those responsible for its design say safety has been a prime consideration. Well, joining me now is Tony Wood, who's Director of Design at Sheffield City Council, who's in charge of the Don Valley Stadium project. Will you be looking again at your design now in the wake of the Hillsborough disaster?
We're bound to look again. We're bound to take on board all the results that come out of the Hillsborough disaster. It's worth mentioning at the beginning, though, that what we're designing is a stadium for athletics, and the needs of athletics are very different to the needs of football.
But nevertheless, do you think that it's practical and economic to design a football ground that is both secure in terms of hooliganism and providing safe access of people in the event of a disaster like Saturday's?
It certainly is possible. The constraints must be the age of many of the grounds, the way they've been built up on an incremental basis over the years, and at the end of the day, the question of cost will always arise.
Well, let's look at some of the practical suggestions which have been made. There is, of course, a great cry and call from many quarters for these perimeter fences to be removed. Do you think that is something which should now happen as a matter of priority?
It's a personal opinion. I wouldn't pretend to be an expert on football, but as an architect, I would like to see them go, or at least adapted so they can be got out of the way quickly in the event of something, as you saw earlier on in this programme.
But, I mean, would it be possible, say, to get rid of fences and replace them with moats? Well, another suggestion we've heard. Could that be done fairly easily and quickly?
On many grounds, I would think it could be done comparatively easy and comparatively quickly.
What about the question of the siting of grounds? I mean, obviously you can't pick up a ground and stick it down somewhere else, but do you think that when football grounds are being designed in the future, they should be removed from town centre sites?
Not necessarily, but what they must have, if you're able, the luxury of designing from scratch, you must be able to have clear spaces outside the ground where people can assemble and be filtered into towards the turnstiles in an orderly way. If you try and bring too many people into too tight a site, then inevitably crowding is a problem that you're going to have to live with.
The points you're making then, as somebody who knows how to design sports grounds, is that they can be designed safely, providing there is a will and providing the money can be found. Now, how do you think you're going to induce the will into the minds of the football authorities to accept the sort of advice and expertise people like you give them?
I think the events of this last weekend will concentrate everybody's minds enormously, and I don't think it's a question of persuasion. I think it's a question of what people have seen and experienced.
But nevertheless, the problem must be, I suppose, what do you do quickly to prevent the possibility of this thing happening again? Because a lot of the solutions you're suggesting are long-term ones, aren't they?
They are long-term. In the short term, I see no reason why on football stadium you could not adapt the fences at the front of standing terraces, if you must have standing terraces, in such a way that they can collapse on order from the stewards.
But in a word, it'd be better to have all seater grounds.
That's my view.
Mr. Wood, thank you very much for talking to us.
Well, we were telling you a few minutes ago about Mr. John Frowlow from King's Lynn, who invented a fence that would collapse. He showed it to, or he tried to show it to, officials from the football business, and no one was interested at all. He then went to work in France because his business collapsed. In fact, he lost £500,000 on his venture. He's in our Paris studio, a Paris studio. Can you hear me, Mr. Frowlow?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Can you please explain to us, when you offered to show this to people from the football business, why did no one turn up or show any interest?
Well, I think the chief, wasn't the fact that nobody turned up. The people interested in security and the fire brigades, and there were almost 200-odd people, came along to the demonstration that we gave. Everybody was there except for the football clubs for whom the whole thing was designed. Now, the reason they didn't come was discovered afterwards, lack of interest. It happened there, it can't happen here, it won't happen to us. And, of course, the costs. When we went around with the project after the full marketing operation, everybody said, oh, we just can't afford it, we haven't got enough money, no, the clubs are broke, and that's how it all ended up.
Was your system a very expensive system?
Not really. It was a system that could be built in section, installed into existing systems. It was chiefly a system of operating gates from a distance with a fail-proof factor, pneumatically operated gates.
Is it still available now? Should clubs now, in the light of Saturday, wish to get involved in a new system?
Well, if they want me to come back to England and start the same sort of thing again, providing there is a true follow-up to the whole thing and there is a true interest, because up till now everybody talks about these things after a disaster, but when it comes to the actual fact, after 2 or 3 months when you're in production with something, everybody loses interest. Now, if the interest is prepared to go on, and people would like us, or would like me, to come back and reinstall this system with my old team, this we're prepared to do straight away.
Do you, have you in the last 48 hours got a terrible I told you so feeling inside your stomach?
Yes, very much so, I must say. At a very expensive I told you so feeling.
Well, it's a terrible, terrible feeling to have. We did see some gates on the news last night demonstrated in France that the French have got, which seems just to collapse on a set control from an official.
Yes, it's more or less the same system as we developed. The only difference is that this one over here in France works on what's called the magic eye, and it's more of an electrical system, which is not exactly fail-proof, for the simple reason that if you rely on electricity, you can have power cuts. If there's fires, wires can burn. Ours was a fully pneumatic system with the tubing at least 1 meter underground, opening up sections of gates. There was nothing external, and could never be touched by intruders or hooligans or anything. There was no way it could fail. Now, if by chance somebody managed to rip a tube out, etc., it was fail-proof in the sense that everything unlocked itself.
Mr. Frowlow, there we have to leave it. Thank you for coming into the studio in Paris.
Thank you very much.
Well, it is one thing talking about a brand new stadium, still under construction, of course, and talking about safety precautions and new fences, Mr. Frylow, but what about our present football grounds, which most of them scores of years old? The biggest in our region outside Sheffield is the home of second division Leeds United, which of course Elland Road.
The ground holds 40,000. There were 33,000 here only last month. But the club say they're completely confident a Hillsborough-type tragedy couldn't happen here. There are crucial factors here which the Elland Road Club believe contribute greatly to safety. First of all, as the spectator first emerges onto the terracing here, there are 2 barriers to make sure that there isn't a surge of people, 20 people wide, coming down onto the terracing. Then further down, the greatest gap between 2 crush barriers is here, which is, about 7 steps. So the greatest force exerted onto this crush barrier here is by 7 rows of people. And then down at the bottom, the fence at the very bottom of the terracing is only, about 4 feet high, which means that people in emergency could climb over it. There's also a gate here, another one to the right, 2 more to the left, and although the fence here is obviously too high to enable people to escape onto the pitch, there is a moat here through these gates through which people hopefully could escape to the right or to the left in an emergency. But what of the calls to seat all spectators and tear down the terraces?
If we start making it all seated, then quite obviously I suspect the price of the tickets will have to go up, and we will prevent those young people who I'd rather encourage, and particularly families, to come to this ground.
By implication, what you're saying is that you can have stadiums that aren't all seated that are perfectly safe?
Absolutely.
And this is one of them?
I believe so.
We've had a very brief meeting this morning, and we're quite happy with the arrangements at Elland Road, and we'll continue with those arrangements unless an inquiry at Hillsborough brings out new criteria.
Do you let people in who haven't got tickets if that's the safest thing to do?
I'd rather not comment on that. I think let me police Elland Road and let somebody else police Hillsborough.
Well, I'm talking about what happened at Elland Road.
Well, if they pay to come in here, either by ticket or by paying at the turnstiles, and that's all I'm saying.
But the leader of Leeds Council, who owned the ground, is unhappy about the fences, which were put up for crowd control.
Crowd safety is even more important, and if the perimeter fences are there simply to control the crowds, but thereby endanger people, then I think we have to think again. And I'm calling for an urgent meeting between the club, the police and ourselves, who are the owners of the ground, to consider these perimeter fences again. We've been successful already in removing the fence at part of the ground, and I'd like to see it coming down elsewhere very quickly.
Well, we've raised many issues to which attention must be given in the wake of the Hillsborough disaster. Are our football grounds safe places? And if not, what then should happen to them? And what about this year's FA Cup? Should the competition be abandoned? Everyone's got a view. We've been asking for the views of the people of Sheffield.
Well, my feelings is they should put it on and take care of receipts for fund for injured and bereaved.
It should go on. It should go on.
It was like a memorial to them who died.
If Liverpool think it's a fitting memorial to the 2 sides and the game itself, then I think it should go ahead. It's just totally up to the 2 teams. I suppose it'd be sort of an atmosphere of sort of melancholy and all that sort of thing, but I don't know.
It's just too much for the players, plus the supporters. They've had this bad weekend and it doesn't deserve to be played.
But do you think the FA Cup ought to be called off this year?
Yeah, it should. It's for respect to people who died, if no else.
It'd have to be in different conditions, on a different ground, where barriers can be opened, say 1 every 200 yards.
Well, I think it should just be abandoned for this year, and then let's get down to it again next year when people's got over the shock.
I think probably it should go ahead as possibly a mark of respect to the ones that have died, you know.
Of course, we'll decide tomorrow whether the Cup final will go ahead. David Bloomfield of the FA is in our London studio. Mr. Bloomfield, we have just had a report here in Leeds from Nottingham that the chairman of Nottingham Forest said just a few minutes ago the game, that's the replay, will go ahead at a date to be fixed. Can you confirm that?
No, there's no question of any decision being made, at least until tomorrow. We've got to find out what is the best way football can show its respect, whether the competition stops or the competition carries on.
So it's not up to the chairman of Nottingham Forest to say whether the game goes on or not?
No, there's the decision-making process going on at this very moment.
Yes. Can I suppose, really, whatever decision the FA make tomorrow is going to be the wrong one in certain people's views. Are you prepared for that?
Well, there's obviously some people that would like the competition to go on, and there's some people that would like it to come to a halt. We're going to have to take all the factors into consideration and hopefully come up with the right decision.
Can you just tell me the mechanics for making this decision? How many people physically actually make it?
Well, it will be made by the Executive Committee of the FA Council. There are 9 members, and they're able to make the decision on behalf of the FA.
Presumably the FA will wish to say, will it not, that the decision, whichever way it goes, was unanimous?
Naturally. What
has been the atmosphere in the FA headquarters in Lancaster Gate
It's
today?
been the blackest day that you could possibly imagine. The whole place is depressed.
Absolutely. There has been inevitably a lot of flack hurled around, not the least at you. What reaction are you having to that?
Well, there's a full-scale public inquiry which is about to get underway, and we'll cooperate fully with that.
Can you comment on another report that's been circulating here today, that it was asked, the officials did ask, that the kick-off should be delayed, but the FA, quote, the FA refused to delay the kick-off. What's the fact of that?
We would totally deny that. We would ask if there's any policeman out there that made any contact with an official of the Football Association to name that official. We've got no knowledge of this situation whatsoever. If a request had been forthcoming, it would undoubtedly have been granted. The previous semi-finals, the kick-offs have been put back in exactly the same set of circumstances.
And who makes that decision as to whether the kick-off should be delayed or not?
They could have contacted Graham Kelly, the Chief Executive of the Football Association, who was at Hillsborough on Saturday.
It has to be made at that level, as high as that, the very top man.
Well, it's a very important decision.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, David Bloomfield, for joining us on what, as you said, is the blackest day in the history of the FA. Thank you.
Well, there are, of course, going to be 2 official investigations. The first, the public inquiry announced today by the Home Secretary in the House of Commons, and the second, an investigation into the actions of the South Yorkshire Police. Well, a few moments ago, my colleague Peter McNerney spoke to South Yorkshire's Chief Constable, Mr. Peter Wright.
I'm delighted that the public inquiry has been established. I think it's essential that there is an in-depth look at what happened so the possibility of it ever occurring again it disappears. We welcome the public inquiry. We've had so much flack thrown at the police, quite unjustified in a lot of cases, and this we've not been able to respond. We can now respond properly to the public inquiry, and I hope it vindicates the South Yorkshire Police.
But don't you fear the blame will be put on the police?
I don't think so, no. I think that when the situation is looked at in depth and when the problems that the police were facing on that day are understood, then I would expect that the decisions that were taken and the police response will receive clearance from the inquiry.
And do you still support the senior officer who took the decision to open the gate?
That senior officer took a decision in the light of his perception of what was taking place at the time. The purpose of the public inquiry will be to examine that decision and everything else the police did on that day and everything else everyone else did and the whole circumstances surrounding a football match of this nature. And really, when I'm speaking to you from this Northern General Hospital where the Prince and Princess of Wales are visiting people who've injured, it comes home to you with far more impact than it could anywhere else.
But many people seem to think that was a wrong decision.
What people think, that's the trouble. There's been far too much speculation with not enough information. And people can criticise with the tremendous clarity of hindsight something somebody did on the day. I am not criticising decisions that were taken. It is not my place to speak about them here. The public inquiry will look at those decisions and the public inquiry will weigh all the evidence that was available to those officers when they made those decisions.
And you're also facing a police inquiry?
No, we're not. I have asked for another force to come in and gather the evidence because I am satisfied that the conclusions will favour the police action. If we collected that evidence, somebody would then start questioning the manner it was drawn together. That's the way of the world these days. Frankly, I want no suspicion attaching to that evidence when it's collected and when it's presented. And even if we'd have done it meticulously, somebody would have said we'd been selective in what we'd presented. So I've asked for those people to come in, and I think it's a good idea that they do.
Days after.
Well, let's pause just for a minute in our review of Saturday's grim events at Hillsborough and look ahead for the weather tonight and tomorrow. Here's Bob Rust.
Well, fortunately, the weather seems to have settled down a little bit. I think that what that means is over the next few days we'll expect very little in the way of rain. Mind you, we should be thankful about that because already we're nearly up to twice the normal for this time of year. Anyway, let me talk about the next 24 hours and deal with tonight first. So for the summary for tonight, Well, it's going to be a reasonably fine evening. There will be some evening sunshine around, although rather cloudy in the south. But later on in the night, all parts are going to become generally cloudy. And near the east coast, there may well be a little bit of light drizzle, but not a great deal. And on the hills, perhaps even the odd patch of fog. And then tomorrow morning, well, starting off that way, a lot of cloud around, bits of drizzle near the coast, but gradually it should brighten up, and in the afternoon, fairly reasonable. Top temperatures about 11 degrees centigrade.
Well, the Prince and Princess of Wales are at this very moment in Sheffield. They've travelled from the Hallamshire across to the Northern General Hospital, where 21 survivors are being treated. We saw them at the beginning of the programme, and we shall have pictures of their visit to the Northern General Hospital in our bulletin at 10:30. And so now, 52 hours after this terrible tragedy at Hillsborough, we come to the end of our special programme. Many questions have been raised, many views have been expressed, and certainly many emotions have been stirred. The tragedy will be felt most keenly, of course, on Merseyside, where friends and family will return no more. But it's also very much a tragedy for our region, because for whatever reasons yet to be ascertained, this tragedy happened here in Yorkshire. And surely the hearts of all of us will go out to the families of those who came from wherever to Hillsborough on a Saturday afternoon to watch a soccer match and never went home.
For tonight here on YTV. At 7 o'clock, Paul Heine continues his travels in trading places and arrives in Portugal. Then at 7:30...
Right, come on, we know you're in there. Let's be having you.
Please, you're not dealing with a child. Norman's a sensitive young man who suffered a shattering blow.
At 8, Erica sets about fulfilling another lifetime's ambition with the aid of a pair of roller skates.
Just a minute. Okay.
Ready, my lad? At 9 o'clock, the bittersweet comedy and a nightingale sang.
Helen, I'm pulled all ways. A son needs his father, doesn't he?
Yes, he does, love. Tonight on YTV.
And remember, the first of those programmes, Trading Places, heads to a magnificent part of Europe, Portugal, straight after this break.
5 o'clock in the morning. Oh.
New Gold bars from McVitie's. Crispy, crunchy biscuit inside, smooth, golden coating outside.
When you've worked up an appetite, thank goodness for Golden Wonder pots. Oh no, someone forgot to go to the shop. The Golden Wonder pots range. Pots of warmth, pots of choice and pots of taste.
Oi! This one! Oh.
Just make sure you take yours with you, eh?
In Today This Week, new revelations of Commons researcher and good time girl, Pamela. She names the other VIPs in her life. Plus, Helen Freeman, the girl who made a desert island dream come true. Girl Friday to a man 12 years younger. She struggled to survive against isolation, insects, sharks, and the jungle.
Find out what my life was like, alone with a man obsessed.
And only in Today, the best bed and breakfast in the world. Collect your free guide to Britain's classiest B&Bs. Make a change for the better. Today.
The summer months bring out the best in your garden, but it's worth making sure that your seedlings, your young buds, your blossoms, your mature blooms, and your hardy perennials are getting along. So simply treat to a little flora that's high in polyunsaturates, low in saturates, and low in cholesterol. Then sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labour. Flora Margarine, for your blooming generation.